The final battle against the Demon Lord rages at his storm-shrouded castle. Inside the hero's party, a swordsman, a female mage, and a rogue finally confronts the Demon Lord. The armored behemoth scoffs, mocking them for being nothing more than mere humans. Wounded and cornered by the hero's party, the Demon Lord reels in disbelief at his defeat. He furiously vows that he won't die for nothing and begins to cast one last powerful spell. The rogue screams a warning, but the Demon Lord's final spell is already loose, impaling them through the torso. The swordsman can only watch in horror, screaming his friend's name, Alex. As the Demon Lord crumbles to dust with one final curse, the swordsman desperately yells for Lilith to use her healing magic, and she agrees. But a moment later, Lilith's face drains of color as she cries out that it's impossible. Lilith explains that it's no use, the wound is cursed, completely nullifying her magic. The dying rogue Alex calmly accepts his fate, telling them he has one final message for Laius. Laius screams in denial, refusing to believe what he's hearing, as Lilith watches in sorrow. As he lies dying, Alex delivers his final message to the party. Smiling weakly through his tears, he thanks them for allowing someone like him to be their companion. Laius screams back in anguish, demanding to know why Alex protected him. He cries out that he should be the one thanking Alex, not the other way around. Laius tells Alex he has his utmost respect, praising him for becoming an archmage, despite never receiving God's blessing. Laius begs him to stop talking, as if this is the end, but Alex insists, reminding them that he was just a commoner. Alex explains that, unlike the nobility, he was born without the divine blessing that comes from having God's blood in his veins. He clarifies that without this blessing, it's impossible to improve one's physical abilities, a critical skill for close-quarters combat. Alex painfully explains that the only thing he ever achieved through his own efforts was magical power, but even that felt incredibly limiting. He concludes that ultimately there was no real difference between him and Laius wielding a sword. In his mind, Laius was the strongest in the world, a magic swordsman who stood as humanity's final weapon. Laius was the hero of their adventure, while Alex was just a supporting character destined for an early exit. As his life fades, Alex wonders if he could have been a hero like Laius had he only been born with a noble's talent for close-quarters combat. He laments that all he ever wanted was to be the main character, a courageous figure everyone looked up to. As Alex's consciousness drifts in the void, a mysterious voice cuts through the darkness. It expresses surprise, having just learned from someone named Cerritos that there's an A-rank adventurer who is also a wind maid. As Alex's consciousness returns, he wonders if he was saved, but is completely paralyzed. The mysterious voice explains this is to be expected, revealing it was his opponent all along, an S-rank assassin. Finally regaining some awareness of his body, Alex is horrified to discover he has the tiny hand of a baby. Alex's mind races with panic. He's been reborn in the body of a baby and can't even scream for help. A hooded assassin stands over him, remarking that while being ordered to kill a baby is cruel, he still has a job to do. The assassin adds that as long as Hez getting paid, he can't complain. Catching the man's reflection in his eye, Alex cuts through the confusion and understands one simple fact: Hez in mortal danger. Staring down the assassin's blade, Alex panics, realizing Hez about to die all over again. With no other options, he decides to gamble on his one last resort, ultimate tier magic, praying it will even work in his new infant body. As the assassin raises his dagger to strike, he coldly tells the baby, "If you must resent someone, resent the fact that you were ever born." A magic circle materializes over the baby as Alex unleashes his ultimate spell, God's Piercing Finger. A colossal beam of pure energy descends from the heavens, blasting the assassin with overwhelming force. A colossal pillar of light erupts into the heavens, its raw power sending shockwaves blasting across the landscape. When the light from the spell fades, the assassin and another robed figure are left unconscious on the ground near a carriage. Alex is flooded with relief that his magic actually worked, but his victory is short-lived. He quickly realizes the immense strain of the spell had one very embarrassing baby-sized consequence. 12 years later, the baby has grown into Princess Evangeline, who now relaxes in a luxurious royal bath. As Evangeline steps out of the water, a maid immediately attends to her, drying her feet. After getting dressed, Evangeline thanks her maids and dismisses them, declaring she'll choose her own clothes from now on. The moment she's alone, Evangeline flops face first onto her bed, letting out a huge sigh of relief. Evangeline still can't get over the shock of her new life, of all the things she could have been reborn, as she never expected it to be a girl. The irony is almost unbearable. She was reborn as the daughter of the 8th Emperor's 14th concubine, in the very country her old comrade Laius founded after their victory against the Demon Lord. Evangeline reflects on her complicated new life as an imperial princess, admitting she's more or less gotten used to the day-to-day of being a noble. But that doesn't mean she enjoys it. The daily routine is a total drag, especially waking up early just to be forced into a mountain of frilly clothes. Her royal education is a grueling gauntlet of etiquette training, language studies, and piano lessons that leaves her completely overwhelmed. It was a massive culture shock having servants handle every little thing for her, even bathing. But while she's grown accustomed to this new life, the dream she held in her previous one hasn't faded in the slightest. Driven by the dream from her past life, Evangeline casts a level 5 physical reinforcement spell, vowing to finally surpass Laius. The magic takes hold, instantly flooding her leg with so much power that her muscles bulge and tense with newfound strength. Triumphant, Evangeline declares her ultimate goal to become the strongest in the world. She immediately casts gravity magic on herself, humming with satisfaction as the spell takes hold. Pushing her body to the absolute limit under the crushing force of her own gravity magic, Evangeline finally hits her 1000th representative. She looks down at her hand and lets out a small laugh, amazed by the raw power her new royal bloodline grants her. Evangeline flexes, realizing that while her magical talent was a gift from birth, her physical strength is finally catching up. She doesn't know why she was reincarnated into the royal family, but she's determined to make the most of this incredible opportunity. To that end, she's developed a grueling routine during her tedious royal lessons. She secretly hones her magic control through meditation, and every spare moment is dedicated to pushing her body to its absolute limit. Evangeline reflects that while her training is going well, she still has a long way to go to catch up to her former comrade Laius. A maid enters the room to fetch her, explaining that Madame has called for her, but she cuts herself off mid-sentence. The maid is completely stunned, having just walked in on the princess casually doing pull-ups on her furniture. Both Evangeline and the maid are frozen in mutual shock. The maid finally breaks the silence with a disbelieving shriek of "Milady," and Evangeline panics, realizing her secret is out. The maid immediately turns and flees the room, screaming for Madame that the princess is lifting. Evangeline reaches out in a desperate attempt to stop her, but it's too late. The fallout from being discovered is swift. The bed Evangeline used for her exercises is gone. She knows her secret muscle training is officially out. She then remembers her barbells were also confiscated a few days ago, and she mourns the loss of her favorite training partner. Evangeline can't understand why her perfectly healthy habit is being treated like a crime. Overwhelmed with frustration, she comes to a simple conclusion: being a noble lady is incredibly inconvenient. Meanwhile, on the royal training grounds, the sound of clashing swords rings out. The butler Sibas spars with Evangeline's brother Christopher. As the young boy grunts under the pressure, Sibas taunts him, asking if that's all he's got. Just then, Evangeline arrives and calls out to her brother and Sibas. Grabbing a practice sword, Evangeline eagerly asks Sibas to teach her some techniques, but her brother Christopher just sighs, asking if she's at it again. Sibas begins to apologize, but Christopher cuts him off with a laugh, telling Evangeline she should just give up. Christopher tells Sibas to ignore her so they can resume their sparring. The butler agrees, addressing him as young master, as Evangeline's hopes are dashed. Dejected, Eva realizes that all her physical training is useless without actual sword practice. Suddenly, a voice interrupts her thoughts, asking if training her body is really that fun. Startled, Eva looks up. The voice belongs to her mother, Vanessa. Eva just smiles and confirms that for her, training is the ultimate pleasure. She immediately repeats herself, explaining that it's the ultimate pleasure, a truth so important it needed to be said twice. Vanessa calls her out, saying all she ever thinks about is working out, listing off exercises like push-ups and sit-ups. She reveals she heard all about it from a maid, and Evangeline immediately panics, bracing herself for another lecture. But instead of scolding her, Vanessa's expression turns quiet and somber. Vanessa reveals the true reason for her concern. When Evangeline was just a baby, an assassin nearly took her life. Evangeline instantly realizes her mother is talking about the attack that happened right after she was reincarnated. Vanessa theorizes that Evangeline's obsession with self-defense must be trauma from that near-death experience. After a brief shock, Evangeline spots the perfect excuse and enthusiastically agrees with her mother's conclusion. Seizing the opportunity, Evangeline passionately declares that an imperial princess faces constant danger and she needs the strength to protect herself. Evangeline mentally congratulates herself on the perfect excuse, but her mother Vanessa isn't entirely convinced. She says that while she understands the sentiment, there's still a problem. Vanessa presses further, questioning why self-defense requires dumbbells and barbells in her room, or why she's been caught shadowboxing and practicing swings every night. Vanessa warns Evangeline that her eccentric behavior has made her the talk of high society, but a baffled Evangeline can't imagine what they'd be saying. Vanessa reveals the absurd nicknames. She's earned the burning fighting spirit, the muscle training lady, and the crowning jewel, Miss Barbell Best in the World. And for the grand finale, Vanessa reveals Evangeline's most recent title, the Armored Princess. She tells her daughter that this is the unfortunate reality of her social standing. But instead of being ashamed, Evangeline snaps her fan shut with a look of pure determination, declaring that this changes everything. She's made a decision. Vanessa explodes at her daughter's declaration, laying down the law. All muscle training is now forbidden. As a stunned Evangeline listens, her mother specifies the ban extends to the training grounds. She insists an imperial princess needs no armor and must not be a disgrace, swearing she will never approve of this for all eternity. Vanessa puts her foot down, declaring that Evangeline is going to become a genuine normal princess. A part of Evangeline understands her mother's reasoning, but she refuses to back down. Pleading with her mother, Evangeline insists she has to study the blade, and that this is one fight she cannot afford to lose. Evangeline lays out her ultimate goal. She will surpass the hero Laius and become the strongest in the world. With a weary sigh, Vanessa says she understands and immediately calls for Sebas. The butler appears at once, asking how he may be of service. Vanessa tells Sebas they need to give Evangeline a bitter experience, so she'll finally understand her place. Sebas turns to a confused Evangeline, telling her he knew this day would come. All she can manage in response is a questioning yes. Suddenly a fan snaps shut as a voice declares that fighting is a man's job. Vanessa clarifies that while a girl with magic might be able to fight, it's impossible otherwise. She then orders Sebas to teach Evangeline a brutal lesson and show her she's completely out of her league, an order the butler readily accepts. As she walks away, Vanessa adds a final chilling request: try not to leave any bruises. With the order given, Sebas turns his attention to the young master Christopher, who has been watching nearby. Sebas orders a stunned Christopher to hand his wooden sword to Evangeline. As Evangeline cracks her knuckles, a shocked Christopher asks if she's serious, reminding her that Sebas was a master swordsmanship instructor at the Empire's military academy. She coolly replies that she's already aware. Christopher scoffs, asking if Evangeline really thinks a little muscle training is enough to beat a man. She coolly replies that hell understands soon enough. In the training yard, Evangeline and Sebas face each other with swords drawn, ready to begin their match. The match begins, and Sebas lunges forward with an apologetic shout. Evangeline instantly recognizes his skill is on another level, far surpassing her own, and even the warriors from her past life. She knows she's no match for the veteran in pure technique, but she has a plan. Evangeline realizes the butler's advantage is limited to swordplay. She easily ducks under his powerful swing, leaving Sebas to cry out in shock as his blade cuts through empty air. Sebas puts his full strength behind a heavy blow, but Evangeline effortlessly parries the attack. In that moment, it all becomes clear. In her past life, she'd already created a complete system of body-enhancing techniques from magical theory. The only thing she lacked back then was the one thing she has now: talent. A surge of raw power floods Evangeline's body as she clenches her fist. The talent for physical reinforcement she lacked in her past life is finally truly hers. As Sebas brings his sword down, Evangeline considers what this power means for the body of a former archmage. She effortlessly spins past his blade and delivers a devastating counterpunch, leaving the butler completely stunned. Evangeline's fist slams into Sebas' jaw as she declares that for her the word impossible simply does not exist. The devastating force of Evangeline's punch sends Sebas flying across the training yard. From the sidelines, Vanessa's regal composure completely shatters in disbelief. The onlookers are frozen in shock. Christopher stares wide-eyed, the maids stammer, and Sebas lies dazed on the ground. The training yard explodes into chaos. As maids rush to her side, Vanessa faints from the shock, muttering Evangeline's nickname, the Armored Princess. Meanwhile, Sebas lies unconscious on the ground. Surveying the pandemonium she's unleashed, Evangeline strikes a pose and wonders if she might have overdone it. She reflects that her boisterous second life has now officially begun. In her past life, Evangeline once stood before a terrifying A-rank dungeon boss, an Elder Lich. With sword in hand, she prepared to unleash her spell, Magic Blade. Evangeline unleashes her ultimate technique, Purgatory Overlord Decapitation, felling the Elder Lich in a single devastating blow. As she lets out a quiet laugh, her comrade stares in utter disbelief, stunned that she ended the A-rank boss fight with just one strike. Back in her past life, a 16-year-old Evangeline celebrates a major breakthrough. She can finally use the magic blade. She vows to keep polishing her skills until she's strong enough to surpass Laius. A 16-year-old Evangeline cheerfully thanks Sebas, crediting his guidance for her newfound mastery of the magic blade. Sebas is left utterly speechless, staring in disbelief, as he wonders what kind of monster has just helped create. Back in the present, Sebas reveals that ever since the incident on the training grounds, has been Princess Evangeline's official swordsmanship instructor. He admits that at first he was thrilled to witness her talent to develop firsthand. Sebas explains that when Evangeline combined her talent with her abnormal physical reinforcement technique, the results were truly monstrous. He recalls her mastering new spells at a rate that defied belief for someone self-taught, which is what first made him suspect the true extent of her power. Sebas realized the terrifying truth Evangeline's power had already reached the S-rank level. He had begged Evangeline to keep her true ability hidden, as another man ominously warned that if she didn't, he would. The moment Evangeline says his name, Sebas panics, grabbing his head and wailing that hell be beheaded for teaching her. Evangeline, however, calmly points out a loophole. Her mother only banned muscle training, which means any other form of practice is still on the table. With a calm smile, Evangeline clarifies that she acquired all her magic completely on her own. She points out to the stunned Sebas that since he only taught her swordsmanship, he can't possibly be at fault. But her flawless logic does little to soothe the distressed butler, who clutches his chest completely unconvinced. Sebas isn't having any of it, shouting that fighting an elder lich was still way too dangerous. He panics, reminding her that their mission was supposed to be a simple training exercise against C-rank lizardmen. They only got permission because he was there to guarantee their safety. Still panicking, Sebas explains that Evangeline selfishly abandoned the designated dungeon route. While he was lost and desperately trying to find his way back, she had already located and defeated the Elder Lich, all by herself. Sebas tearfully begs Evangeline not to mention her dungeon exploits to her mother Vanessa. Evangeline, however, just smiles, telling him not to worry if that's his only concern. Evangeline gives a thumbs up, assuring Sebas she handled the lizardmen just fine, but he retorts that they were never the problem to begin with. Later, as Evangeline sits at her vanity, a voice remarks that Miletus' swordsmanship training seems to be progressing well. Evangeline declares she's having the time of her life, and the maid attending to her hair happily agrees. But the maid's tone shifts, and with a sigh, she reminds Evangeline that while it's good to be healthy, she must not forget what her mother Vanessa told her. The maid frets over the preposterous idea of a princess becoming a bulky macho figure. Another maid, Letha, pleads with Evangeline to restrain herself from excessive muscle training. Evangeline cheerfully agrees, but her sudden compliance makes the maid doing her hair deeply suspicious. With a serene smile, Evangeline snaps a thick leather belt in two with her bare hands, causing a nearby maid to cry out in shock. Letha panics, asking what she thinks she's doing, but Evangeline simply tells her to calm down. Evangeline calmly tells the maid she'll understand soon enough, but a horrified Letha covers her mouth, stammering that it can't be that Milady is. Letha completely misinterprets the situation, blushing, as she thinks the princess is making a move on her. She panics, realizing she can't possibly accept an advance from royalty, let alone a minor. As her mind flashes to these scandalous rumors she's heard about the Kingsley family's particular tastes. Before Letha can process what's happening, Evangeline drops a massive dumbbell that smashes a crater into the floor, leaving the maid completely stunned by the raw display of power. It finally clicks for the horrified maid. This wasn't a romantic advance, it was a demonstration of monstrous strength. Standing in her undergarments, Evangeline casually informs the stunned maid that her underwear is woven from special heavy metal fibers, with the top and bottom weighing 50 kilograms apiece. As she puts her top back on, Evangeline adds that while she'd prefer all her clothes to be weighted like this, she has to keep her muscle training to a minimum. Evangeline tries to reassure the stunned maid, but Letha can only stammer out her title. As Evangeline asks what's wrong, a flustered Letha just begs her to get dressed. Suddenly it clicks for the maid. The special fiber could only have come from a high-difficulty monster that weaves its nest from solid steel. Letha's blood runs cold. as the horrifying truth dawns on her. The threads could only have come from the nest of a Dragonia spider. Evangeline is impressed Letha figured it out. The stunned maid demands to know where on earth she got something so rare, but Evangeline just smirks, saying that's a story for another time. Evangeline cheerfully confirms it, casually explaining that she recently visited the Dragonia spider's nest and harvested the thread herself, leaving Letha utterly speechless. Horrified, Letha questions how a princess could go to a monster's nest alone. It suddenly clicks she remembers a time when Evangeline mysteriously disappeared, and realizes with dawning dread that this must have been when she undertook the dangerous task. Evangeline flexes playfully, admitting she might be a bit of a tomboy, but Letha absolutely loses it, yelling that the princess' actions are completely insane. The maid continues to panic, insisting that no amount of talent or skill matters when the task was that dangerous. She frantically demands to know what Evangeline would have done if she'd been attacked by a dragon. As Letha keeps muttering about the weighted underwear, Evangeline wisely decides to keep her mouth shut, knowing it's probably not the best time to mention that she could instantly kill a dragon with her magic blade technique. Through tears, Letha points and scolds Evangeline, reminding her that this is exactly the kind of behavior her mother Vanessa forbade. The maid continues her frantic lecture, desperately pleading with the princess to have more self-awareness and act like a proper lady. Ignoring the lecture, Evangeline dons a hooded robe and simply walks out of the room. Now alone, Evangeline sits on her bed, replaying Letha's lecture about femininity in her mind. She thought she was finally getting the hang of acting like a proper noble, but now her mind drifts back to her past life and to a memory of someone named Alexan. In her past life as Lilith, she tells a man named Alexan that she's finished repairing his robes, and he gratefully thanks her. Alexan is stunned by how new the robe looks, and praises her incredible sewing skills, leaving Lilith completely flustered. He notes that she's usually too busy training to think about her appearance, and asks if she'd like to go clothes shopping with him the next time they're in town. A flustered Lilith immediately shuts him down, calling clothes shopping a waste of time and leaving Alexan completely baffled. She immediately backpedals, stammering out an excuse that as a member of the hero's party, she understands the need to be presentable to gain public acceptance. Snapping out of her memory, Evangeline has to admit that her current body is undeniably beautiful. It finally clicks that her mother and the maids only pester her because they truly care. With a sudden resolve, she snaps her fingers, deciding it's time to do something about it. Putting her new resolve into practice, Evangeline activates her needlework technique skill. As she pulls a needle from her sewing kit, she reflects that this is a necessary step. Gaining acceptance from others is just another part of her grand plan to become the strongest in the world. Evangeline admits to herself that she's always prioritized function over fashion, which is why her dress and underwear are so plain. With renewed resolve, she decides to rework them into a truly exquisite design. Elsewhere, two women discuss the princess. One remarks that Evangeline's immense talent for swordsmanship was a grave concern, but the other counters that her sudden interest in clothing is a very good sign. Vanessa breathes a sigh of relief, convinced Evangeline is finally developing the self-awareness of a true princess, while a maid nervously agrees. Internally, the maid panics, resolving to keep the truth about the muscle training underwear from Vanessa. She knows she'll have to speak with Letha about this later. Oblivious Vanessa instructs the maid to proceed according to their plan, and the maid confirms she understands. Vanessa confidently announces that at the debutante party next month, Evangeline will finally shed her shameful reputation as the armored princess. Evangeline mulls over the advice that a lady must make good use of her spare time. Flipping through a book of lingerie designs, she admits her plan to remake her clothes into something more feminine is proving much harder than she expected. The designs are a far cry from what she saw at a brothel Laius dragged her to in her past life. Head told her to learn how to have fun when she complained about training, and she has to admit she wasn't entirely uninterested back then either. Closing the design book, Evangeline hits on a simple solution. When in doubt, just add a lot of lace. She immediately activates her needlework technique skill. After a flurry of activity, she tries on the new frilly garment, sighing in relief that it turned out all right. Elsewhere, Letha sprints through the halls in a panic, kicking herself for not telling Evangeline something crucial sooner. She finally reaches the door and knocks, announcing herself to Milady. From inside, Evangeline's voice grants her permission to enter. The moment Letha enters, she stops dead in her tracks, completely horrified. Staring at what Evangeline is wearing, she cries out, demanding to know what on earth she's looking at. Letha's brain short-circuits, connecting the dots to the salacious rumors about the royal women's private lives. She thought Evangeline was just showing off her training gear before, But this new lacy getup is clearly a different kind of special underwear. Litha is now completely convinced the princess is propositioning her. In reality, Evangeline is just stretching, focused on improving her speed and flexibility. But as the flustered maid watches, she admits to herself that if it had to be anyone, she wouldn't mind it being her beautiful milady. For a fleeting moment, Litha admits she doesn't want to reject her. Milady's feelings she'd gladly return them if she were allowed, but that resolve instantly shatters. Overwhelmed with panic, Litha realizes she can't go through with it, and her composure completely snaps as she desperately prays to God for an answer. After her near-total breakdown, Litha forces a serene smile, deciding the only way forward is to pretend she saw absolutely nothing. A short while later, Evangeline is fully dressed and asks about the debutante party. Still rattled, Litha confirms that's exactly what she came to discuss. Litha explains that the debutante is a prestigious high-class banquet, exclusively for royalty, an opportunity to forge connections and strengthen alliances while dressed in their finest. Litha excitedly reveals this isn't just any party, it's Milady's official debut into high society. As maids suddenly swarm her with jewelry, the gravity of the situation hits Evangeline. She stares in horror, asking if they're actually talking about her. In the Imperial Palace's Phoenix Hall, a maid frets to Vanessa, asking if Lady Eva is going to be alright. Vanessa confidently replies that as long as Evangeline conceals her strange obsession with muscle training, her behavior is flawless, then gestures forward and tells the maid to behold. As Evangeline is revealed, Vanessa proudly asks if she isn't the most lovely woman in all of history. The maid breathlessly agrees, calling her a heavenly maiden. Vanessa laughs smugly, taking full credit. Of course she is, she boasts. She's my daughter. A maid notices Evangeline's foot moving strangely and asks what she's doing. Evangeline cheerfully explains she's doing calf raises, declaring that one can't waste a single moment when it comes to strengthening muscles. As she gives a technical breakdown of the exercise, both Vanessa and the maid are left completely speechless. Beaming with pride, Evangeline finishes her technical explanation, clarifying that her calf raises work both the gastrocnemius and soleus muscles. Utterly horrified by her daughter's behavior, Vanessa finally snaps, screaming at Evangeline that she's worried sick about her future. The tense moment is broken by the arrival of Prince Richard the Queen's third son. With a condescending smirk, he makes a snide comment about finding a concubine in the company of his youngest sister. Evangeline demands to know why Prince Richard is blocking the main entrance, while a nearby maid tries nervously to speak up. Richard explains that there's a problem for some unknown reason. They're being forced to use the men's entrance. Richard lets out a condescending laugh. With a smug grin, Richard reveals it was his order all along. Evangeline is left completely baffled by his confession. Richard then scoffs condescendingly, remarking that had heard Eva was studying swordsmanship despite being a girl. Richard continues to mock her, arguing that if she's going to wield a sword, she might as well be treated like a man. He lays out the societal rules. Women become adults when they enter high society, but men only gain that status at age 20, or by becoming accomplished warriors. Richard continues his taunt, declaring that the youngest child could never meet the requirements of a warrior. Incensed, Evangeline demands to know what he just said. He concludes his condescending lecture by smugly stating that men and women each have their own distinct roles to play. Richard continues his lecture, declaring that a woman's role is to remain silent, serve as a strategic pawn, and dedicate her life to bearing children. Evangeline's expression hardens, her fury building at his condescending words. She's reminded of her past life, where the hero Laius formed his party and founded an entire country based on merit, not gender. Evangeline's expression turns to ice as she challenges Richard, asking if he's ignoring his own lecture on the roles of men and women. Addressing him as Oni-sama, she compliments the sword at his hip, recalling that the blades gifted to the men of the imperial family are forged from pure mithril. Richard smirks, boasting that no matter how much she studies swordsmanship, a girl like her will never wield a blade of this quality. Evangeline just smiles back, agreeing that it does look incredibly sturdy. She takes a single deliberate step forward. Then she adds that she's heard destroying a mithril weapon is one of the requirements to be recognized as a true warrior. Richard's smug expression vanishes as he demands to know what she's getting at. Before Richard can even react, Evangeline whips his sword from its scabbard in a single fluid motion, leaving him completely stunned. As Richard screams in disbelief, Evangeline activates her body reinforcement skill at full power and presses the mithril blade against her chest, intending to snap it in half. With a sharp grunt, Evangeline drives the blade against her chest, shattering the pure mithril sword into countless fragments. Richard stares, completely stunned at the fragments of his prized sword as Vanessa and a nearby maid watch in absolute horror. Evangeline casually dusts off her chest, completely unfazed. With a look of genuine disappointment, she asks if that's really the best a pure mithril sword can do. Evangeline scoffs, declaring the sword doesn't even compare to her favorite orichalcum exercise bar. Richard lets out a shriek of disbelief, while Vanessa stammers in horror that Evangeline just broke a pure mithril sword with her bare hands. The shock sends Vanessa collapsing to the floor. As a maid rushes to her side, Richard flees the scene in a blind panic. He retreats to the VIP room inside Phoenix Hall. Once inside, he slams his fist down in a rage, cursing in frustration. Still reeling in the VIP room, Richard's mind races. He can't fathom how Evangeline could have possibly broken a pure mithril sword with her bare hands. It should be impossible. He scrambles for an explanation, guessing their father. His Majesty must have given her some kind of physical strengthening tool, but he quickly dismisses the idea. In the end, it doesn't matter how she did it. Richard smirks, confident it won't be long before he sees the look of despair on Evangeline's face. An associate asks if he has made his decision, and Richard coolly confirms that he has. He then reveals his master plan. While an imperial army led by his brother is supposedly subjugating the southern Khmer's tribe, Richard has secretly guided the tribe to a hiding spot right next to the imperial capital. Richard smirks, realizing that with the army lured away, the capital is completely defenseless. He declares they'll never get a better chance than this, and his associate confirms that all the arrangements are in place. Richard's associate confirms their forces are ready, having gathered 100 elite assassins and 3,000 of the barbarian tribe's finest warriors. He voices his concern, warning Richard that while they have an agreement, one wrong move could see their hired forces seize control of the entire country. Richard coldly dismisses the warning, declaring that he simply does not care about the risk. In a fit of rage, Richard sends a table flying, revealing the true source of his bitterness. His Majesty chose his brother to be the next emperor. He scoffs at the reason his brother's proposal to establish an order of female knights and questions who would be foolish enough to entrust military affairs to women. Richard concludes that if an utter idiot like his brother takes the throne, the country will be doomed. Richard vows that tonight's royal party will descend into chaos, and he will finally make his father and brother kneel before him. He laughs, savoring the thought of the terrified expressions they'll have when the attack begins. Richard declares that the rebellion begins now. Elsewhere, Evangeline is completely oblivious to the chaos that's about to erupt. Evangeline steps into the grand hall for her debutante party and is immediately struck by its opulence. Her eyes go wide at the sight of the magnificent ballroom and the lavish spread of desserts as she gushes about how gorgeous it is. Having recovered from her earlier shock, Vanessa suggests they enjoy some food before the party officially begins. Evangeline readily agrees, addressing her as mother. Evangeline takes her first bite of a dessert and is completely blown away. She closes her eyes in pure bliss, exclaiming that she never knew sweetness could taste so incredibly good. As Evangeline continues to devour her food, a nearby noblewoman watches with a condescending smirk. But her amusement turns to pure horror when she spots the mountain of empty plates stacked beside the princess. The woman lets out a shriek, demanding to know how it's possible for one person to eat so much, finally snapping Evangeline out of her dessert-fueled trance. The gossip mill starts churning as nearby nobles identify Evangeline as the infamous armored princess. They whisper about her using the men's gate and mock her with nicknames like Miss Barbell, deciding the rumors of her acting like a man are true. The cruel words cut through her blissful haze, and Evangeline freezes as the reality of their insults crashes down on her. Her mother Vanessa approaches with a look of tired acceptance, confirming her daughter's fears. This, she says, is how high society sees you. As if on cue, a man beside them obliviously asks Evangeline if she's enjoying the party. The man is revealed to be Prince Richard. A young noblewoman accompanying him asks why he's making an issue of things, pointing out that they entered according to formal procedures, and questioning if that wasn't enough. Richard ignores the woman and addresses Evangeline directly. He concedes that she followed procedure, but taunts that since she entered as a man, it carries a much deeper implication. With a smug grin, Richard tells Evangeline that since she entered as a man, she still has to undergo the ritual. The young noblewoman with him immediately protests, shouting his name, and insisting he's taking this too far. Richard waves off her concern, clarifying that the ritual is just a simple mock battle. Baffled, Evangeline turns to her mother Vanessa and asks what he's talking about. Richard lays out the tradition all men in the royal family are considered soldiers, and their first social gathering doubles as a coming-of-age ceremony where they must demonstrate their strength. The noblewoman with Richard protests that it's not so simple, while Vanessa grimly mutters that the ritual is nothing more than a public humiliation. Richard explains that the ritual pits them against the Empire's most distinguished fighters, like the champion of the swordsmanship tournament. The noblewoman with him asks if that means they're not even supposed to win, and Richard confirms that's exactly the point. Vanessa cuts in, revealing the ritual's true purpose to beat them into submission until they're forced to declare their complete subordination to the Empire. Hearing this, Evangeline's expression hardens as she clenches her fist. Richard's earlier words echo his intent. Since Evangeline insisted on learning swordsmanship, he would treat her as a man no matter what. A massive figure steps forward to confront Evangeline, and with a sharp snap of his fingers, Richard signals for the mock battle to commence. Evangeline questions why the contest is martial arts instead of swordsmanship, but Richard coolly explains Hez well aware of her skill with a blade. He introduces her massive opponent as last year's martial arts champion, and clarifies the rules. Since bloodshed is forbidden in the royal court, no striking or weapons are allowed. Evangeline confirms the rules of the match: only joint locks, chokeholds, and throws are permitted. Richard agrees, telling her she's exactly right. Richard explains it's a pure contest of grappling skills, reasoning that with Evangeline's unconventional strength, allowing strikes would be too unpredictable. Inwardly, Richard smirks. Security is at its weakest during the ritual, the perfect time to call in his rebellion soldiers. He scoffs at his father's naivete, knowing the Emperor has no idea what's coming. Watching her, Richard internally vows that his new empire will have no room for defiant women like Evangeline. Nearby, two noble women gossip, with one pointing out that Evangeline's fate is sealed regardless of whether she wins or loses this match. Evangeline's opponent, the martial arts champion, announces that whether she's a sideshow or not, he won't be underestimating her. A concerned noblewoman asks Evangeline if she even knows any grappling techniques, and the princess admits she has no experience in this kind of fight. Richard internally smirks, knowing that while strikers can overwhelm with raw power, grappling is a world of pure technique, rendering Evangeline's strength completely useless. The martial arts champion warns Evangeline that brute force alone won't be enough to win this fight. In the center of the hall, Evangeline and the champion take their stances, ready to begin their grappling match as the crowd watches on. As Richard watches with a confident smirk, the announcer declares the start of the match. The champion immediately lunges for Evangeline's throat, but she calmly catches his wrist mid-air, stopping the attack dead in its tracks. But the champion proves his title is no joke, instantly reversing Evangeline's defense and trapping her on the ground in a brutal triangle choke. As Evangeline struggles against the hold, Richard erupts in laughter, gloating that the fight was far too easy. He smugly declares that all they have to do now is wait for her to pass out. Caught in the chokehold, Evangeline admits to herself that while she knows nothing about martial arts, she possesses overwhelming physical strength. She begins to exert her raw power, and the champion's face twists in pure shock, feeling an impossible force rising from the ground. With a furious roar, Evangeline taps into her overwhelming strength, rising to her feet and hoisting the martial arts champion into the air. She slams him back down with a devastating powerbomb, leaving Richard and the entire crowd completely thunderstruck. Evangeline finishes the throw, slamming the martial arts champion into the ground with such devastating force that the floor cracks on impact. Richard and the noblewoman beside him can only stare in utter disbelief, their minds completely failing to comprehend the impossible scene before them. Evangeline stands over the unconscious martial arts champion, who lies defeated in the crater she just created in the floor. While Richard stares in stunned silence, Evangeline turns to face him and calls out to her brother. She asks him if it's true that in the world of martial arts technique is everything, before pointedly adding a single devastating word. However, she answers her own question, declaring that overwhelming physical strength solves everything. The crowd explodes in a wave of disbelief. A noblewoman gasps, asking if that was a powerbomb, while others just stammer that the princess simply lifted the champion off the ground. One man can only mutter, "Good Lord," while the rest of the nobles are frozen in shock. Evangeline's mother Vanessa turns away from the scene. A quiet, satisfied laugh escapes her lips. A noblewoman in the crowd is utterly scandalized, muttering that imperial ladies are meant to be elegant and modest. Clenching her fist, she questions why Evangeline would act in such a way, Her composure finally shatters as she wails in horror, crying out why the princess had to use a power bomb and lamenting that it's all over. As the crowd reels from the power bomb, the 8th Emperor Oliver Kingsley descends the grand staircase. His arrival sends a fresh wave of shock through the hall, and someone shouts his title. Startled, Evangeline calls out to her mother, but Vanessa is frozen. Her mind races through every infamous nickname her daughter has earned: Armored Princess, the Muscle Training Lady, Miss Barbell, and Best in the World, realizing with dawning horror that she's heard them all. The Emperor Oliver Kingsley calmly remarks that a powerbomb was the last thing he expected to see from Evangeline. A nearby noblewoman wails that the rumors were true, the princess really is a tomboy. But Oliver's face gives nothing away as he adds a single crucial word to his thought. However, Emperor Oliver Kingsley concludes his thought: Evangeline's strength is undeniably real, but he finds it a profound waste that she is a girl. He then calls out to Evangeline. As she starts to address him as her father, he cuts her off with a single direct question: why does she desire strength? Before Evangeline can answer, the grand hall doors slam open. A squad of armed soldiers storms inside with swords drawn, throwing the court into chaos as the nobles scream and scramble away in terror. As armed soldiers surround the royal family, Emperor Oliver Kingsley demands an explanation for the intrusion. A triumphant, maniacal laugh cuts through the chaos. It's Prince Richard. The Emperor and a nearby noblewoman look on in utter shock as Richard calmly descends the stairs, casually saying, "Well then." Emperor Oliver Kingsley stares in utter disbelief, stammering his son's name. But Richard is completely unfazed, calmly addressing the panicked court. He drops a bombshell. The majority of the Imperial Army is away on an expedition, leaving only the 3rd Army to protect the capital, an army under his personal command. Enraged by the betrayal, the Emperor glares at his son and calls him a bastard. Richard just smirks, telling everyone, hell, let them figure out the rest for themselves. Furious Emperor Oliver Kingsley demands to know if his son is staging a rebellion. From the top of the stairs, Richard calmly corrects him. This isn't a rebellion, it's a revolution for justice. Richard pins the blame squarely on the Emperor, stating his overconfidence is the reason the country is in danger. He coldly asks his father if he finally understands. The Emperor retorts angrily, asking if Richard has forgotten about the elite order of guard knights. He scoffs that occupying the capital with just the 3rd Army is impossible. Richard concedes that even a foolish emperor would take precautions, but then drops a bombshell, asking what his father plans to do about the 3,000 Khmer soldiers already lurking on the capital's outskirts. Suddenly bound in ropes, the Emperor roars with fury, demanding to know if Richard sold their country out to the Khmer dog. Looking down on his captured father, Richard calls the act disgraceful, but reveals he has forbidden the Khmers from touching their land. Richard reveals his true promise to the Khmer soldiers: the right to rampage and pillage. Emperor Oliver, Evangeline, and the entire court recoil in horror at his monstrous declaration. Richard continues his tirade, declaring that the first emperor's ideal of a perfect military nation has been lost. He blames this decline for the founding of female knights, and for allowing a spineless coward who tolerates people like Evangeline to take the throne, but vows that it all ends today. Richard throws his arm into the air, proclaiming himself the legitimate heir and the new ruler of the Rosgard Empire. He then points to a distant door, informing the terrified court of an escape route leading from the courtyard and out of the capital. Richard announces he will postpone the start of the massacre by 30 minutes, calling it the only mercy they will receive. Richard screams for everyone to run, and the court immediately erupts into a panicked stampede for the exit. Evangeline watches them go grimly, observing that few can resist the instinct to escape when given the chance. The Emperor's rear guard arrives, urging Oliver Kingsley to escape, but he refuses to run. He accepts full responsibility for the coup, admitting his own failures drove Richard to ally with the Khmers. As he speaks, he begins to draw his sword, declaring that above all else. With his sword fully drawn, Emperor Oliver Kingsley roars that as the commander of an army, he will not flee and leave women and children behind. Struck by his resolve, one of his rear guard soldiers utters his title in awe as the Emperor plants his foot, refusing to retreat. One of the Emperor's soldiers reports the grim numbers. They have only 200 men, against an enemy force of at least 500. As another guard pales at the news, the first soldier confirms their fears, stating the difference in strength is overwhelming. Emperor Oliver spots Evangeline still in the hall and shouts her name in alarm, thinking she failed to escape. One of his guards frantically yells for her to get behind them. Instead of retreating, Evangeline rips off the lower half of her formal dress. The Emperor and his guards stare in absolute shock, and Oliver is so stunned he can't even finish his sentence. Ignoring their shock, Evangeline rips a massive marble sphere from a balustrade. As she hefts the improvised weapon, a soldier stammers that the crude hunk of rock is too thick and round to be called a weapon, realizing in disbelief that it's solid marble. With the marble sphere held ready, Evangeline locks eyes with the Emperor and calls out to her father. Facing her father and his men, Evangeline declares she is there to assist. With a powerful roar, she winds up to hurl the massive marble sphere, prompting one of the Emperor's soldiers to scream in panic for her to wait. Ignoring the soldier's plea, Evangeline unleashes the massive marble sphere. It tears through the hall like a cannonball, obliterating Richard's front line and sending bodies flying. The soldier who tried to stop her screams in horror, unable to comprehend the princess' monstrous strength. Richard's soldiers are left completely shell-shocked, unable to process the devastating attack. Before the dust even settles, Evangeline tears an entire marble pillar straight from the floor, hoisting the massive column onto her shoulder as her new weapon. As Evangeline smirks, ready to strike again, a voice screams out in disbelief, demanding to know what the hell is going on. Richard's soldiers scream in terror, their minds failing to comprehend the sight of Evangeline wielding an entire marble pillar as a weapon. Before they can recover, she swings the massive column with terrifying speed, smashing through their ranks and sending men flying as someone cries out in awe at her incredible speed and power. The pillar continues its devastating swing, blasting through Richard's soldiers and sending them flying. As they're thrown aside, one man screams in terror. What is wrong with this girl? Surveying the carnage, Emperor Oliver Kingsley is left in stunned disbelief. Head always dismissed his daughter's nicknames as jokes, but he never imagined she wielded this kind of destructive power. But before he can fully process this, Evangeline calmly looks over the fallen soldiers and reports that the situation has been suppressed. But that incredible display of power comes at a steep price. Evangeline suddenly gasps for air, shouting that she's completely out of stamina. Her poor endurance is a direct result of her pampered upbringing. Living in a mansion meant her maids would always stop her before she could sneak out for the long-distance runs needed to build stamina. One of the Emperor's soldiers assesses the situation. While Evangeline's attack threw the enemy into chaos, he grimly points out that their numbers are still overwhelming. As things stand, they're still on track to be defeated. A powerful aura flares around Evangeline as she resolves to go all out. Richard's soldiers notice her physical rampage has stopped. Seizing the opportunity, a commander points at the glowing princess and orders the magic troops to begin their ritual. As a massive magic circle erupts, Richard's commander points directly at Evangeline. He orders his troops to target her, declaring that once she falls, the path to the Emperor will be clear. Emperor Oliver's eyes widen in horror as he recognizes the powerful ritual magic. His shock instantly twists into panic when he realizes the entire spell is aimed squarely at his daughter Eva. The commander screams the order to fire, unleashing a devastating barrage of energy beams from the ritual magic. As the entire attack converges on a motionless Evangeline, Emperor Oliver Kingsley can only watch in horror, screaming his daughter's name. As the magical barrage converges, Evangeline remains completely unfazed, effortlessly absorbing the immense energy into a swirling vortex. She then reveals her true power, declaring that in her past life she was the mage in the party that defeated the Demon Lord. She scoffs, mocking the idea that a few dozen ritual magicians could ever hope to stand against her. As the spectral image of her past life as a male mage materializes behind her, Evangeline holds the swirling vortex of absorbed magic aloft, warning her enemies that they've made a fatal miscalculation. Evangeline channels the absorbed energy into a single devastating counterattack, unleashing the combined spell Starflame God Prison. The massive Starflame God Prison spell slams into Richard's soldiers. They have just a moment to stare in confusion before it detonates with catastrophic force, blasting them away in a massive explosion as they scream in agony. Emperor Oliver Kingsley is completely floored, rendered speechless by the cataclysmic power his own daughter just unleashed. Meanwhile, in a hall packed with evacuated nobles, one woman's relief turns to alarm as she realizes neither Princess Eva nor the Emperor are anywhere to be seen. She quickly deduces the Emperor as a paragon of the Empire would surely stay behind to command the rear guard. Her thoughts then turn to Evangeline, wondering what will become of the princess who has always craved a real fight. The noblewoman's panic spikes as a horrifying thought hits her. What if Evangeline uses this chaos as an excuse to fight alongside the Emperor overwhelmed? She cries out that it can't be, that absolutely must not be allowed to happen. Driven by her fear, the noblewoman declares she's going to find Evangeline herself and bolts. A nearby maid calls out in surprise, "Madam." The maid catches up, pleading with her not to bring such disgrace upon herself in front of His Majesty. But the noblewoman ignores the warning, desperately calling out for Eva. After frantically searching the palace, Vanessa bursts into the room and freezes in absolute horror, her maid equally stunned right behind her. She's found the throne room, but it's been turned into a battlefield. Amid the wreckage and fallen soldiers, Emperor Oliver stands before their daughter Evangeline, who radiates a terrifyingly powerful aura. The Emperor spots her and furiously demands to know why she came back. Overwhelmed by the carnage, all Vanessa can do is stammer his title. The Emperor grimly confirms Vanessa's worst fears, admitting that, as she can see, Eva has been going at it. The reality of the situation crushes Vanessa. Her lifelong dream of raising a proper lady and being an exemplary mother shatters, and she cries out in despair that everything is ruined. The crushing reality is too much for Vanessa, who collapses unconscious. As her maid screams in panic, Emperor Oliver simply looks on. Emperor Oliver stares at Evangeline, his mind racing to grasp the implications of his daughter wielding such overwhelming magical and physical power. Beside him, Sabas begins to wonder if a certain shocking possibility could actually be true. As Evangeline looks on, Sabas wonders if the legendary power of the first emperor actually dwells inside her. Emperor Oliver mutters his daughter's nickname, Armored Princess. His mind races. If the theory is true, Eva is the perfect candidate for a secret plan has been preparing. Oblivious to the serious plotting around her, Evangeline just smiles and says, "Oh well." Surveying the carnage, Emperor Oliver Kingsley praises Evangeline, telling her she did well, and that their enemies have been dealt with thanks to her. But her only response is a single chilling word: no. As the Emperor reels, Evangeline explains that the battle isn't over. She activates her search magic, 1,000 Miles Eyes of Truth, and her vision instantly expands, revealing a long road leading far away from the capital. Her magic zeroes in on a group of glowing figures hiding in a forest clearing, and Evangeline announces, "Found you." Completely stunned, Emperor Oliver asks his daughter, "What are you?" Evangeline simply replies that they must hunt down and destroy the remaining enemies lunging forward to finish the job. In a forest clearing on the outskirts of the capital, the last of the rebel forces lie in wait. A single boot slams onto the ground before the assembled soldiers, announcing a new arrival. Prince Richard steps forward with a grandiose gesture, smugly welcoming the newcomer to his empire. The newcomer smirks, privately judging Prince Richard for offering a night of pillaging as a reward for joining his rebellion. But Richard scoffs at the title, correcting the man that it's no longer His Highness, it's His Majesty the Emperor. Richard clarifies their deal: the violence is permitted for tonight only. The man simply bows, confirming he understands the term. The mercenary leader turns to his forces and roars out their orders for the night. With the Empire's main army, away they are to grab what they can and break the rest. In response, the mercenaries erupt in a savage cheer, raising their swords ready to begin the rampage. As the mercenary leader gives his men free rein to rampage, the rebel army charges across a bridge toward the capital's main gate. But as they approach, one mercenary laughs in disbelief. The main gate is wide open. Another squints in confusion, spotting a lone figure standing in the entryway. Standing alone against the entire army is Evangeline, a powerful aura flaring around her. While one mercenary demands to know who this girl is, another just scoffs that it doesn't matter and orders the troops to charge. As the rebel army charges, Evangeline activates her spatial storage magic. A magic circle flares to life at her feet, and she summons the massive marble pillar she wielded in the throne room, readying the colossal weapon for battle. Letting out a powerful roar, Evangeline swings the colossal marble pillar. The rebel soldiers are paralyzed with shock for a fatal moment before the massive weapon crashes into their front line, blasting them into the air with devastating force. The surviving rebels scream in disbelief as the bodies of their comrades are flung through the air from the sheer force of the impact. As the massive pillar slams to a halt, Evangeline addresses the terrified survivors. Recalling their earlier question about what was wrong with her, she calmly offers to give them an answer. Tapping the colossal pillar, Evangeline asks the rebels if they're blind. One of the terrified soldiers screams back, demanding to know what she's talking about. With a calm smile, she clarifies her intentions. She's here to send every last one of them flying. From a safe distance, Prince Richard and the mercenary leader comment on the loud commotion coming from the bridge. Their discussion is cut short by a sudden massive crash that startles them both. Richard's face twists in horror as he screams out in disbelief. The source of the crash becomes brutally clear as a rebel soldier launched all the way from the bridge slams into the ground near Prince Richard. As someone screams in shock, Richard stares in horror, demanding to know what kind of impossible power could be responsible for this. The rain of bodies continues, sending both Prince Richard and the mercenary leader into a panic. They scream, demanding to know what's happening, but Richard is completely consumed by terror. The impossible sight is too much for Richard, who abandons his post and flees, leaving the mercenary leader to watch in utter disbelief as his employer deserts him. As Richard flees in a panic, his mind scrambles for an explanation. His father couldn't have outsmarted him, that's impossible. Head checked his intel meticulously with the main army gone. The capital should have been defenseless. Then the mocking nicknames for his sister echo in his mind: Armored Princess, Miss Barbell, the muscle training lady. Richard freezes the horrifying truth, hitting him like a physical blow. He'd heard the rumors, of course, but he never imagined the reality was this monstrous. As Evangeline stands calmly at the gate amidst the bodies of the defeated rebels, Richard is horrified. Had heard the rumors about his sister's strength, but he never imagined they went this far. Evangeline lets out a satisfied huff, a smug smile on her face. The mercenary leader grabs the panicked Prince Richard, demanding to know why he wasn't warned about a powerhouse guarding the capital. Richard, completely unhinged, screams back that she's just one girl. Meanwhile, a surviving rebel soldier stares at the carnage in utter disbelief. Looking at Evangeline standing untouched amidst the bodies of his comrades, he screams in terror. What kind of world creates a girl like you? Realizing the fight is a complete slaughter, the mercenary leader screams at his surviving men to retreat, ordering anyone still standing to run for their lives. As the mercenaries turn tail and flee across the bridge, a panicked Prince Richard watches his entire plan fall apart, screaming at them not to run. Evangeline appears before Prince Richard, calling him brother, before calmly accusing him of orchestrating a coup against the state. Richard breaks into a cold sweat, his eyes wide with terror, as he finally grasps the true gravity of his situation. Prince Richard's mind races, desperately searching for an escape. Fighting Evangeline is out of the question. He'd be annihilated, running away with the mercenaries. He dismisses the thought just as quickly. A horrifying rumor Head once dismissed as a joke flashes through his mind: Eva running 100 meters in 3 seconds while weighed down by 500 kilograms. After witnessing her monstrous power firsthand, he knows with sickening certainty that it's true. The realization is crushing. In the screaming silence of his own mind, Richard understands there is absolutely no way to run and nowhere to hide. Evangeline cracks her knuckles and asks Richard if he's familiar with her nicknames, sending him into a full-blown internal panic. As Richard begs her to stay back, Evangeline lists her titles Armored Princess Miss Barbell, but says, "There's another." She explains she earned it after forgetting to sleep and spending an entire night practicing punches with barbells until dawn. Her fists blur into a terrifying flurry, and she reveals the final nickname she earned that night: the Thousand-Armed Cannon Princess, a title inspired by the Thousand-Armed Buddha. Evangeline unleashes a brutal flurry of punches, launching Prince Richard through the air and slamming him into the stone ground. Battered and broken, Prince Richard looks up in terror, coughing, as he begs for forgiveness and admits his utter defeat. With a terrifyingly cheerful smile, Evangeline asks if Richard wasn't paying attention to her story. She reminds him they have plenty of time until dawn, promising his punishment is far from over. Completely shattered, the terrified prince can only choke out a single letter in response. All night long, Prince Richard's desperate screams echo as he begs for the punishment to end. Later, Evangeline stands before her father, Emperor Oliver, who sits on the throne in the audience chamber. Beaming with pride, Emperor Oliver praises his daughter, telling her she did well. He declares the rebellion was suppressed entirely because of her, but Evangeline humbly replies that she is undeserving of such high praise. Evangeline clarifies that her deeds were only half the effort, explaining that her father's secret assassin squad eliminated the remaining rebels. Evangeline admits she had no idea such a powerful squad even existed. Emperor Oliver explains that's by design. They're the Obsidian Shadow, a secret unit established by the first emperor. He reveals that even he was kept in the dark about them until the night of his own coronation. A young man in armor chimes in, pointing out that a secret weapon isn't much of a secret if everyone knows about it. With a knowing smile, Evangeline remarks that the armored man's comment about secrets is so typical of Laius. The man now identified as Laius immediately apologizes to Evangeline. Emperor Oliver explains that he has ordered all soldiers who witnessed Evangeline's actions to keep them secret, for which he is deeply sorry. But Evangeline agrees, stating that her power, like the Obsidian Shadow, is only meaningful because it is a secret. Emperor Oliver praises Evangeline, declaring that her power surpasses that of 10,000 soldiers, and tells her he has a request. He explains his plan to establish an all-female Night Order for the Inner Palace, citing the recent rebellion as the official reason to strengthen security. Evangeline immediately cuts to the chase, asking what the actual purpose of this new Night Order would be. Emperor Oliver admits the all-female Night Order is just a cover story. The true goal is to forge a new secret weapon for the Empire, a clandestine squad led by Evangeline herself. He justifies this by recalling history, explaining that a woman was part of the first Emperor's party that defeated the Demon Lord, and questions why women were ever barred from the battlefield in the first place. The Emperor then gives Evangeline her first mission: enroll at St. Lucrezia Girls' Academy, an elite school for talented noblewomen, and recruit the seeds for this new imperial force. Evangeline confidently accepts her father's mission. However, she has one non-negotiable condition: he must provide the academy with a muscle training room. Elsewhere, a girl's voice expresses pure delight, having just learned her beloved Wai-sama will also be enrolling in the academy. She declares that they must be truly connected by the bonds of fate. The voice belongs to a dark-haired girl named Clarice, who sits smiling in a room disturbingly filled with portraits of a single blonde girl. Cradling a doll made in the blonde girl's likeness, she affectionately calls it Wani-sama. Clarice holds up a display case containing what she calls her Wani-sama's sacred handkerchief. She internally gloats that she obtained the prize by taking full advantage of her position as a cousin and showing up to her room uninvited. She opens the display case and presses the handkerchief to her face, inhaling deeply. Clarice continues her monologue, praising her Wani-sama's elegance and declaring that even her muscles are a work of art. Pressing the handkerchief to her face, she whispers how deeply she yearns for her. The scene shifts to the St. Lucrezia Girls' Academy. At the St. Lucrezia Girls' Academy, a man named Michele de Lucrezia puzzles over a new directive from the Emperor. While the school can certainly accommodate a princess, her enrollment comes with a bizarre condition he can't begin to understand. Reading the Emperor's letter, Michele finds the absurd demand the dormitory must be equipped with a muscle training room. He crumples the letter in a rage, bellowing that the request makes absolutely no sense. Still fuming, Michele questions why they're being forced to accept the armored princess. He gripes that Vanessa was supposed to be educating the girl at the Inner Palace, and worries about such a notorious figure taking the Academy's test. As Michele stews at his desk, wondering just what kind of girl the princess could be, his office door opens. A voice announces their entry, and the principal stammers a greeting as the princess herself walks in. Evangeline gives a perfect curtsy, expressing her gratitude for the opportunity to take the test. Principal Michele is completely disarmed by her refined manners. He had heard wild rumors about the so-called armored princess, but this polite young woman seems nothing like the stories, making him wonder if they were just vicious exaggerations. However, Michele's suspicion flares up again when he notices the enormous luggage she's carrying. He asks what's inside, and Evangeline begins to answer. With a proud smile, Evangeline opens her enormous luggage to reveal its contents, her personal bench press. Principal Michele's face drains of all color. His worst fears are confirmed. The wild rumors about the armored princess were true all along. Principal Michele is horrified, convinced that enrolling such an eccentric princess will completely shatter the Academy's dignity. But he steels himself, remembering that the Academy has total autonomy. Not even the Emperor can interfere with their decisions. Glancing towards the magic practical training facility, Michele resolves to proceed with their original plan. As they walk, Principal Michele lays out the Academy's purpose. It was founded exclusively for noble families and a fundamental understanding of magic, is a non-negotiable admission requirement for all students, even royalty. With that, he begins to describe the traditional test they conduct. Principal Michelle explains the test is simple target practice. He elaborates that it's the most elementary form of offensive magic, but there's a catch. A magic interference barrier is active across the facility. Though he admits it can normally be overcome, he internally resolves to make the test exceptionally difficult just for Evangeline. Principal Michelle smirks to himself, confident he's made the test so difficult that no one in the entire country could possibly pass it. But for Evangeline, the magic interference barrier is child's play. She immediately realizes she could shatter it instantly, but correctly deduces that brute force isn't the real point of the test. Principal Michelle instructs Evangeline to destroy the target from her current position by any means necessary. Evangeline immediately deduces this isn't a test of magic, but a riddle designed to test her wisdom. To clarify the rules, Evangeline asks a hypothetical question. If she were to cast a fireball, would it be a violation if her arms and legs left the designated ring? Principal Michelle confirms that would be no problem. The principal sternly clarifies the one and only rule: anything is allowed as long as she does not step outside the designated area. Evangeline pushes for one last clarification, asking if it would be a problem if she did something after the target was destroyed. Principal Michelle confirms that the test ends the moment the target is gone. With the rules fully clarified, Evangeline declares the solution is simple. As the principal watches in utter confusion, she leans forward, preparing to execute her plan. Foregoing magic completely, Evangeline launches herself toward the target with breathtaking physical speed. Principal Michelle cries out in shock, completely stunned by her unorthodox, non-magical approach. As Evangeline soars through the air, Principal Michelle can only stare in disbelief, screaming that she actually jumped. With a determined grin, Evangeline declares that her solution is simple: Shell, just use her muscles. With a ground-shattering impact, Evangeline lands directly on the target. The metal is instantly annihilated, and the shockwave pulverizes the stone floor beneath, leaving nothing but a massive crater. As the dust settles, Principal Michelle is left utterly speechless. In the center of the crater she just created, Evangeline straightens up with a confident smile. When he finally finds his voice, all Michelle can do is scream her infamous title, the Armored Princess. The dust settles at the St. Lucrezia Girls' Academy. Principal Michelle has to admit it. There's no way he can fail her now. After witnessing that terrain-destroying display of power, he can't deny she passed the practical exam. A cold sweat breaks out as he realizes that having the infamous Armored Princess as a student is going to be a complete disaster for the academy. As he guides Evangeline through the academy, Principal Michelle internally spirals, certain that accepting the Armored Princess will destroy the school's prestige, but has not defeated yet. He admits he never wanted it to come to this, but he knew she was a musclehead from the beginning. Stopping before a classroom, he resolves to use one last trick. He'll do whatever it takes to achieve his goal. With a confident smirk, Principal Michelle announces that Evangeline's final test will be a written exam. He internally gloats about his scheme, while transfer students normally take a standard exam, forcing Evangeline to take one equivalent to the top class midterms, certain that a muscle-brained brute like her could never pass. Principal Michelle internally gloats, knowing he's given Evangeline a test on par with the Imperial Wizard exam. He's positive that no amount of muscle can solve these problems. In front of a classroom full of students, Principal Michelle announces the final condition to pass: Evangeline must score higher than the class average. The other students murmur in confusion, wondering why the new transfer student is being subjected to such a test. As Evangeline walks to her desk, whispers ripple through the classroom. Even the academy's top students who were prepped for the material are convinced it's impossible for the princess to pass. From the front of the room, Principal Michelle officially announces that the exam has begun. Just a moment later, a nearby student lets out a gasp of utter shock. A nearby student gasps as Evangeline's quill flies across the page at an impossible speed, with another exclaiming about how fast she is. Principal Michelle is completely floored, thinking to himself that this is impossible. The problem she's answering can't be solved that easily. When Evangeline pauses to dip her quill in ink, the principal realizes it has only been 5 minutes, and asks in utter disbelief if she has already finished. Principal Michelle clears his throat, noting that Princess Evangeline appears to have finished her answer. When he asks why she's standing beside her chair, Evangeline cheerfully explains that since students can't leave during an exam, she decided to wait in an air chair, revealing she's holding a perfect squat just inches above the seat. Completely broken by Evangeline's bizarre and brilliant performance, Principal Michelle can only wallow in despair. Later in the academy courtyard, Evangeline reflects that the exam was a total success mostly because she got to do an air chair. Suddenly a voice from behind asks if she's Princess Evangeline. She confirms it is her and asks who's there. The girl introduces herself as Leonora von Lilienthal, the class president of the top class, revealing she was taking the exam right alongside Evangeline. Leonora immediately asks if the princess is aware that the academy is an autonomous institute completely separate from the aristocratic system, leaving Evangeline to stammer a confused, "Huh." Leonora explains the academy's founding doctrine is for all students to treat each other as ladies regardless of their status. With that established, she tells Evangeline there's something she must say. Putting it bluntly, Leonora declares that Evangeline is a nuisance, leaving the princess completely stunned by the accusation. Leonora continues her tirade declaring that the academy is an institute for training alchemists, magic researchers, and, above all, perfect ladies. She scolds Evangeline for the inappropriate air chair stunt during the exam. With total confidence, Leonora states that the passing requirement beating the top class average score is impossible for her, promising that tomorrow's results will put the princess firmly in her place. Leonora dismissively declares that Evangeline will never be allowed to enroll. Internally, Evangeline scoffs is forcing a one-sided demand on someone immediately after an introduction, truly behavior befitting a lady. As Leonora turns to leave, Evangeline stops her. Seizing on the term one-sided, she challenges that they'll just have to see about that. Leonora smirks and throws down a wild wager if Evangeline actually passes she'll do a naked handstand around the entire academy courtyard. She then accuses Evangeline of whining to the emperor to force her way into the school, declaring that as class president she absolutely will not permit it. Laughing, Leonora says she can't wait to see the results tomorrow before turning on her heel and leaving Evangeline behind. The next day, the exam results are posted and a massive crowd of students immediately swarms the bulletin board to see the final rankings. In the crowd, Leonora's friends are already celebrating, absolutely certain she's taken first place as usual. Leonora herself stands by, soaking in the praise with a confident smile. With a smug smirk, Leonora thinks to herself that the outcome is obvious. After all, she's always been the top student among the first years. Leonora finds her name second place with 98 points. While she's slightly disappointed not to get a perfect score, she accepts it, knowing how difficult the exam was. But a moment later, the implication hits her like a ton of bricks. In a burst of pure disbelief, she screams, demanding to know how she could possibly be second. Meanwhile, in his office, Principal Michelle reviews the exam. Head intentionally included a question about the final theorem of Archmage Alex, an ancient ally of the first emperor, specifically to guarantee Evangeline would fail. Clutching the paper, his confidence evaporates into pure panic. He knows only 5 people in the entire world can solve that problem, and he can't comprehend how she is one of them. Back at the bulletin board, Leonora is in a state of complete shock, screaming and demanding to know how Evangeline solved the exam. Leonora's gaze shoots to the top of the list. Rank 1 belongs to Evangeline Kingsley, but where her score should be, it just says impossible to grade. Completely floored by the nonsensical result, Leonora screams, demanding to know what it means. Still reeling from the results, Leonora completely loses it, screaming at the board and demanding to know what impossible to grade is even supposed to mean. As the other students stare shocked by the commotion, 2 figures calmly approach the bulletin board through the crowd. It's Principal Michelle with Evangeline right beside him. He announces to the students that there is in fact an explanation for the transfer student's unbelievable exam score. Principal Michelle explains that for the practical exam, Evangeline received a perfect score, adding that her physical attack was so overwhelmingly powerful it completely destroyed the terrain. He concludes that this gives Evangeline the highest score in the Academy's history. As the other students reel in shock, Leonora is in utter disbelief, questioning how a purely physical attack could lead to such a result before muttering the infamous title, the Armored Princess. Amid the stunned reactions, one dark-haired girl clasps her hands in adoration, gushing that this is exactly what she'd expect from her Wani-sama. She proclaims that a beautiful goddess of muscles has descended upon the academy. Principal Michelle and Evangeline stand before the bulletin boards, addressing the large, murmuring crowd of students. Gesturing to the results, Principal Michelle announces that, as they can all see, Evangeline's written test was impossible to grade. Principal Michelle reveals the exam included a question on Archmage Alex's final theorem, and Evangeline answered it perfectly. The crowd immediately erupts in whispers that theorem is a legendary unsolvable problem, that only 5 people in the entire world can answer. They can't believe the meat-headed princess could have possibly solved it. Looking exhausted, Principal Michele confirms that yes, it's a legendary question that almost no one can solve. But then he begins to explain what Evangeline actually wrote on her test. Principal Michele drops another bombshell. Evangeline didn't just solve the theorem, she demonstrated it using a completely different method, one that diverged from the official model answer written by Archmage Alex himself. The implication dawns on a stammering Leonora. Evangeline answered the hardest question on the test entirely on her own. Principal Michele simply confirms her horrified realization is correct. Principal Michele explains that while the teachers found no contradictions in Evangeline's demonstration, her method was so unprecedented they couldn't verify if it was correct. This is why her score was ultimately deemed impossible to grade, leaving Leonora utterly floored. This completely shatters Leonora's worldview. As a commoner, her entire identity and pride are built on the fact that she has never once been outdone academically by any noble. Reeling in agony, Leonora feels her academic pride being completely snatched away by the very meat-headed princess shed dismissed. As a defeated Leonora stumbles back in disbelief, Principal Michele simply sighs, resigning himself to the outcome. A student in the crowd asks if this means Evangeline will be enrolling, and Principal Michele confirms it. As Leonora stands there completely stunned, Principal Michele announces that because Evangeline attained a perfect score in both practical skills and knowledge, she will be recognized as a scholarship student with the highest score in the Academy's history. Finally snapping, Leonora steps forward and calls out to the principal. Just then, Student Council Secretary Scarlet de Valentina steps forward, declaring that she cannot overlook this and shocking the other students. The crowd immediately recognizes her whispering in disbelief and wondering if a member of the Student Council is actually about to get involved. Scarlet de Valentina states that by enrolling with the highest score in history, Evangeline has effectively placed herself on par with the student council, including Scarlet herself. She then declares that this is a reality she will absolutely not accept. Scarlet proclaims that the student council is the very peak of the academy. Her position is her greatest pride, and she refuses to allow this situation to stand. Scarlet de Valentina shouts that her position on the student council isn't just a title, it's her entire identity. The crowd immediately recognizes this dramatic display, buzzing that it's Scarlet's famous identity proclamation. Others mutter about her audacity, noting she always speaks her mind whether anyone wants to hear it or not. Unfazed, Scarlet just smirks, thinking to herself that now nobody can stop her. As Scarlet speaks, the crowd starts whispering, calling her the student council's eternal secretary, a stubborn monster who constantly challenges the president and vice president, only to be defeated every time. Overhearing this, Scarlet furiously shouts them down. Ignoring the chatter, Scarlet plows ahead with her speech, proclaiming that as a noble she is perfect in both practical skills and academic prowess. She then directs her scorn at Evangeline, demanding to know why the armored princess, a disgrace to all ladies, should receive the same treatment as her. She declares the very idea is laughable. Pivoting from Evangeline, Scarlet turns her venom on Leonora. She sneers, asking why a simple academic loss has her so dejected, then twists the knife by reminding her she's just a commoner with no magic to begin with. Scarlet piles on, declaring that Leonora doesn't even have a speck of talent for physical reinforcement. It's simply not in her nature. As Evangeline watches, the brutal public humiliation completely crushes Leonora. As Scarlet continues her verbal assault, Evangeline scoffs at the very mention of talent. The word sends her back to a memory from her past life as a hooded male mage. A former comrade, an armored warrior, had asked if he was concerned about not being able to use physical reinforcement, only to reassure him that his status as an archmage was built entirely on his own effort. In the flashback, Laius tells Evangeline's past self that to complacent people, his relentless effort is indistinguishable from the power of a god. The memory fades, and Evangeline returns to the present, silently processing what she just recalled. Clenching her fist, Evangeline internally agrees with Laius. He was the one who built this country. She reflects that while combat isn't a latest territory, magic is expected of nobles. Noticing her intense expression, Scarlet asks what's wrong. Scarlet presses her, demanding to know what she's trying to say. Evangeline offers a simple way to settle things, a mock battle. She declares that she'll show Scarlet a kind of power that can't be attained by talent alone. The duel is set to take place in the first gymnasium of the prestigious St. Lucrezia Girls' Academy. Inside, an elderly man named St. Lucrezia proudly reflects on the academy's long and glorious history. His pride quickly turns to bewilderment, however, as he wonders just what is about to unfold in his esteemed school. As Evangeline and Scarlet face off in the gymnasium, St. Lucrezia has a meltdown demanding to know why his prestigious academy has been turned into a battle arena. Evangeline calmly cuts to the chase, asking Scarlet if she really lost her temper, just because Evangeline looked down on a commoner with no talent. Scarlet confidently declares that there is a wall that cannot be surpassed by effort alone, and Evangeline quietly agrees with her. Evangeline declares she'll prove that accumulated effort can surpass talent, but Scarlet scoffs, retorting that as a member of the royal family, Evangeline has no right to make such a claim. She presses the point, arguing it's not the least bit convincing when someone born as the very embodiment of talent preaches about the virtues of hard work. Evangeline calmly concedes that Scarlet may have a point before trailing off with a thoughtful, therefore, Evangeline concludes, "I will not be using magic for this fight." Scarlet takes this as a grave insult, scoffing that Evangeline is underestimating her. As she warns the princess not to play such foolish games, a ball of dark, fiery magic ignites in her hand. Declaring she won't hold back, Scarlet unleashes a powerful 5th-tier magic spell, Bright Crimson Flame Force, sending a swarm of fireballs erupting around her. As the dark fireballs swirl around a completely calm Evangeline, St. Lucrezia watches in shock, stunned that a mere first-year student can wield such incredible power. St. Lucrezia is floored, marveling that Scarlet has already mastered such a high-level technique. Evangeline, however, remains completely unfazed, calmly noting that Scarlet appears to be controlling every single fireball on her own. With a confident smirk, Scarlet points forward and declares that her attack is about to begin. Screaming that it's all over, Scarlet unleashes her attack, sending a storm of dark magical projectiles hurtling toward Evangeline from all sides. But as the deadly barrage closes, and Evangeline simply closes her eyes, her expression one of absolute calm. The storm of dark magic flies right past Evangeline, who opens her eyes completely untouched, and her expression unchanged. Scarlet screams in disbelief, demanding to know how she could have possibly dodged. Internally, she reels, forced to admit the princess is far more capable than she ever anticipated. Scarlet shrieks that with such an overwhelming swarm of attacks, there's no way Evangeline can keep dodging forever. But instead of dodging, Evangeline suddenly explodes forward, closing the distance between them at incredible speed. Evangeline rockets forward, her body a silver blur, as she carves a path straight through the magical onslaught. Scarlet is completely stunned by the princess' insane speed and reckless charge. As she closes in, Evangeline declares that if power has a physical form, it can be destroyed. The horrifying realization dawns on Scarlet. Evangeline is aiming for the core of the spell itself, intending to shatter it and dissipate all the magic at once. Scarlet watches in horror as Evangeline chops her fireballs apart with nothing but a bare hand. The princess calmly explains that sufficiently trained muscles can surpass mere heat, a declaration that only sends Scarlet into a deeper rage. From the sidelines, a stunned Leonora whispers "Wani-sama" in pure reverence. Her entire worldview crumbles as she realizes the princess is no simple meathead. Leonora's scientific mind short-circuits. She knows that extreme heat denatures proteins, literally cooking human cells like an egg in a frying pan. What she's witnessing is a biological impossibility. Her logical framework shatters, replaced by pure starstruck awe. Leonora realizes the princess is a being who can casually transcend the fundamental rules of life itself. While Evangeline stands calmly, with her arms crossed, having proven her point, Leonora is left breathless, admitting the princess is simply amazing. Utterly defeated, Scarlet scrambles for an explanation, stammering that she just witnessed the legendary physical reinforcement of the royal family. She shouts that of course she would lose to such an overwhelming power. Pointing an accusatory finger, Scarlet insists her attacks never stood a chance against the innate talent of royalty. Unmoved, Evangeline calmly informs her that she is making one crucial mistake. Evangeline calmly clarifies that she hasn't been using physical reinforcement. Stunned, Scarlet screams back in disbelief, demanding to know what she just said. As Evangeline continues speaking, she stomps forward and grabs Scarlet by the collar, causing her to let out a terrified yelp. This is a triumph of pure muscle, Evangeline roars, and with a powerful throw, she slams Scarlet hard into the gymnasium floor. With Scarlet pinned, Evangeline wrenches her into a submission hold, proudly announcing her signature move, the Imperial Princess-style Boston Crab. From the sidelines, Leonora excitedly shouts the name of the move, the Boston Crab, as St. Lucretia stammers in disbelief. Trapped in the agonizing submission, Scarlet screams out the name of the hold herself. Evangeline fluidly shifts her grip, locking Scarlet in an even more brutal submission. She proudly announces her new technique, the Imperial Princess-style Spinal Twist Judgment, as Scarlet shrieks in pain. Just then, frantic footsteps pound down the gymnasium corridor, and a voice rings out yelling that they heard a dispute had escalated into a duel. A noblewoman appears in the doorway, her hand gripping the frame. She announces that while Evangeline's enrollment was the Emperor's, she cannot allow her own daughter to bring shame upon the Academy. As a mother, she declares she must intervene before this escalates into a crisis. Scarlet's mother freezes in the doorway, her face twisting in horror as she recognizes the submission hold and begins to stammer its name. Her horrified scream of Boston Crab echoes through the hall, and with the duel's outcome sealed, the scene shifts to the Academy's infirmary. In the Academy infirmary, Scarlet's mother groans as she awakens completely disoriented. Sitting up, she's startled to find Principal St. Lucretia and a maid at her bedside. The principal asks if she's feeling all right, but after a moment, she furiously confronts the principal, demanding an explanation for why her daughter Scarlet was putting another student in a Boston Crab. Elsewhere, Scarlet is horrified, realizing her mother's memory of the event is completely backward. Scarlet's mother panics, worrying aloud that her daughter's behavior has escalated. Principal St. Lucretia gravely adds that the Academy is also deeply concerned about the incident. The principal then offers to escort Scarlet's mother to the princess dorm to wait for the time being. However, upon arriving, Scarlet's mother recoils in absolute horror, screaming and demanding to know what she is looking at. The source of her horror is revealed: a grand hall in the Academy has been converted into a fully equipped weightlifting gym. Scarlet's mother is aghast, questioning how the esteemed St. Lucretia Girls' Academy, the Garden of Red Roses and White Lilies, could possibly have muscle training facilities. Her panic escalates as she demands to know why such a thing exists, stressing that this isn't a military school or a sports powerhouse. She confronts Principal St. Lucretia, demanding to know why he is allowing something so outrageous, and warning that there will be immense problems if the Emperor learns of it. The principal sighs, explaining the facilities were hastily set up to accommodate Princess Evangeline's enrollment. Principal St. Lucretia explains that the order to install the facilities came directly from His Majesty the Emperor. Scarlet's mother can only echo his words in disbelief. The principal continues, quoting the Emperor's decree: "Provide the princess with any training equipment she desires, and ensure it is of the highest quality, as the very honor of the Empire is at stake." Utterly floored by the revelation, Scarlet's mother stammers that it couldn't possibly be true, not from the Emperor himself. Scarlet's mother concludes the Emperor has finally snapped from the stress of his duties, her mind conjuring an image of him cackling maniacally at his desk. Meanwhile, a weary Principal St. Lucretia tries to press on with his explanation. The principal explains that the princess entrance exam results were flawless, leaving him no choice but to accept her into the Academy. Desperate, Scarlet's mother confronts the principal, pleading to know if there's anything at all that can be done. Principal St. Lucretia warns that at this rate, it won't just be his and Evangeline's reputations on the line. Soon the public will start questioning the Emperor's sanity. He then asks Scarlet's mother if she's worried about that possibility too. She admits that she has also. Scarlet's mother proudly declares that she herself was educated as a proper lady at this very academy, and insists there is a way to solve their problem. Principal St. Lucretia replies that he is already aware of the solution she has in mind. Scarlet's mother gasps as the realization of what he's implying suddenly hits her.